Good morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via State Morning Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide. I'm Rolika Roach and welcome to the virtual live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Rudolph Samuel, to address you. Minister Samuel, you have the floor. Minister Samuel, can you kindly unmute your mic, please?
Thank you. Good morning, PM. Good morning to my colleagues, Council of Ministers. Good morning to the media. Good morning to St. Martin. And again, most naturally, remembering all of us out there who are in one way or the other, going through challenging times. Not only with family members passing away, that is very challenging, but definitely it is also challenging for many parents to go along with what we can consider in life now as new normals. All over we have new normals. I want to bring to your attention that we all understand that now that the country is in a lockdown, that when it comes to education, and we are talking secondary education, that the school will not be able to do the final written exams like it normally did. So there is a process ongoing together with the school boards in using a method to see to it or to bring about the graduating of the students. And together with the school boards, the ministry is working on this system. So you will realize that the schools have done what we will consider maybe their first center toots or their first general exam, but during the year, they also have been doing different tests with the kids. And together with what we have, so what has been done without the final written exam, we are looking at a method in coming up in a way that the students can graduate. So special attention is being given to our students and especially those in the exam classes. We cannot indicate at the moment when schools will reopen because we are in a state of emergency, and during the state of emergency, we have to wait until we get word from the AOC. Once the AOC have made clearance that the state of emergency is lifted, then secondly, we can look into when schools can open, and if schools can open, then we will definitely be giving the exam students special attention to see how we can save whatever we can save up until that moment. Other students that are receiving attention are our children, our students abroad. Now, normally around this time, around the end of April going into May, you would have some students, especially United States, that would be closing off their studies and would be able to come home. Now that they are not able to come home, you can imagine that they would be encountering different situations. Some of them that they might have to move from the campus they are at. Some of them would have nothing to do. So how do we fill the time? How we keep an eye on them? And also looking at when it will be possible to bring them home. So together with the ministry, we are keeping an eye on these issues. So for the parents, I would like to let you know that I do have attention to this. So in regards to summer classes, in regards to students having to leave their apartments, attention is being given to all of this. For the teachers and for those of us who are busy with schools, I would like to make mention that the normal carnival vacation will continue and will be the way it normally is. And that is for schools. because I cannot make any other announcement for another entity. So for the schools and especially for the teachers who have been putting in so much, it is important to know that the carnival vacation will continue as is. When schools are opening, when we get a green light, and also before the green light, we are looking into what needs to be done if a student or if the children would have to go back to school. What things need to be changed at school, what need to be implemented, and how we can possibly assist going back to school in the most safest way possible. Because we know that all of us are in the situation, but not all of our situation is the same. So if we were to bring back students in the exam class to do something, we know that not all students have transportation, not all the children can go in one bus. When they reach at the school, not all of them would be able to stay in one class, depending on the size of the class. So I want you to know by mentioning these things that attention is being paid to how we will resume education in the future when this time is when the time is ready for us to resume vacation. I would like to leave it here for now and await any questions that would come. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Samuel, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Egbert Duran, to address you. Minister Duran, you have the floor.
Good morning, Ms. Roach. Good morning to the Prime Minister, my colleague ministers, members of the media, and a special good morning to the people of St. Martin. Firstly, I would like to commend the fire department, the police force, GB workers, all the water truck workers, in the great stride that they fought the other night in terms of the fire that we had. I really appreciate all the efforts that they put in. They were busy from the night straight into the morning. I would like to commend all of them and thank all of them, and making sure that no houses were damaged in this. And for that, I would like to say a special thank you. I will go over now to updating you on the following. Recently, I had meetings between my support staff together with the Secretary General, department heads within the Ministry of VROMI concerning hurricane preparedness. Among the topics discussed were the hurricane shelters and the necessary works that needs to be completed for all these various locations. Pumps and their maintenance prior to the start of the hurricane season, the cleanup and removal of various car wrecks and boat wrecks. Some of the additional matters were discussed as well were in regards to streetlights and government vehicles. In this regard, I scheduled a meeting next week with the NRPB in order to discuss these pending matters, as I see them as top priorities in order to get the ministry moving in the right direction. In regards to what we've all been seeing going on in regards to rent and so forth, as a representative of the people, I've been receiving multiple complaints from tenants and landlords alike pertaining to rental payment. As a minister of VROMI, under which public housing falls, I felt it important to address these concerns that have spiked since the start of this COVID-19 pandemic. It goes without saying that once a landlord and a tenant enter into a rental contract, both parties are expected to comply with their obligations according to that agreement. For the landlord, that means, among other expectations, that a proper home or rental space will be provided to the tenant for their use. For the tenant, that means that, among other obligations, that they will pay their rent on time in the agreed amount. The COVID-19 pandemic and subsequently fallout due to this pandemic has caused some unforeseen stoppage in cash flow within the general population of St. Martin, as well as businesses on the island. This has led to continued issues and frustration between tenants and landlords. While the ministry is not condoning or suggesting that tenants should stop paying their rent completely, the ministry is strongly urging tenants and landlords, together with the rental committee, to seek reasonable solutions to the conflicts that have arisen as a result of this pandemic. Even if attempts to resolve the possible rental conflicts prove to be unsuccessful, all parties are encouraged to be empathetic to one another during these trying times. This goes both ways, of course. Landlords are encouraged to be lenient as possible with tenants that have suddenly lost their jobs temporarily due to this pandemic and suddenly find themselves in a very compromising position as a result of this. And on the other hand, tenants who can still afford to pay their house rent should not take advantage or use this opportunity to withhold rent money from landlords and use this money for other matters. Both parties have to take each other into consideration, meaning that the landlord be sympathetic to the tenants that are going through a genuine struggle, and the tenants also need to understand that many landlords, when not receiving the rent, will also not be able to meet their obligations. There are landlords that only survive off of their rent. Therefore, this would also be a part of having them struggle if both parties does not take each other into consideration. I believe tenants should realize that any leniency shown by the landlord, specifically during this time, does not constitute the right to permanently stop paying your rent. That is very important. So for me, the bottom line is if you can afford to pay your rent, please do so, because as a tenant, you eventually still will be obligated to pay the balance of the rent in the coming months. In other words, where possible to continue, pay as much as you can, as the outstanding amount will only continue to accumulate. To help both the tenant and the landlords navigate through the questions that they may have, some frequently asked questions and answers will be posted on the official website of the Government of St. Martin. If anyone should have any questions pertaining to the proper process of eviction, please visit the official website of the Government of St. Martin, as this information will be made available. I would also like to give notice that the submissions for the tender for the security of the sanitary landfill and the solid waste of Parcel 6 will take place on Friday, April 24th at 10 a.m. and at 10:30, respectively, at the government building, as was published in the media. In closing, I would like to reiterate to the general public that due to the continuous spread of the COVID-19, continue to practice proper hygiene and social distancing. Each and everyone has their own role to play in terms of flattening the curve. Together, we will get through this. God bless the people of St. Martin, and I look forward to any questions that the media might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Duran, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Artwell Edion, to address you. Minister Edion, you have the floor.
Good morning, Rolika. Good morning to Honorable Council of Ministers. Good morning to the media and to all those viewing by all the different forms of media. People of St. Martin, there is $1 billion on an account for us where we could pay within 3 days 100% of salaries. I know to many of you, when you heard that, you probably were very shocked in disbelief and questioned the reality. And it's true, it's not true. That is far from our current realities. I've seen many questions come in and so forth. I've even been to the Parliament yesterday. There isn't an infinite amount of money. There isn't a bag of money laying around. There isn't free money in any open markets. This government, we are dealing with limited resources, as many countries are dealing with in this pandemic. Even with our limited resources, we believe that we have made a very, very conducive stimulus package that encompasses most of our population. I would like to now break down the stimulus package in very, very simple terms, the concept and the ideas. With the limited resources that we have and no yet firm commitment from the Netherlands, we have decided to use our liquidity support to help our nation, our country, by 1, supporting businesses, and by 2, supporting individual entities. Businesses, of course, have to show checks and balances. It isn't free money. Businesses don't have to pay back. But our money that's coming in is not free. We have to pay back our money also. It's a loan. The 3 steps are, for businesses, show a reduction in revenue of 80 to 100%. Businesses then qualify for 80% of payroll. Category 2, 50 to 80%. Businesses then qualify for 70% of payroll. Category 3, 20 to 50%, businesses then qualify for 60% of payroll. Again, businesses must also submit certain documents, which can be found on the website www.ssrp.sx. Also, we have set up a separate entity, or we are working with a separate entity to handle the COVID unemployment. So everyone that has been unemployed or affected by COVID since March 15th. This entity will be paying out individuals separately. Again, you can apply online via www.ssrp.sx. As I'll go a little bit off script now because I'm getting a few questions, and I believe I'll speak a little bit more from the heart. It would have been my pleasure to have a situation where we had online banking, digital banking, payment services, but in my opinion, if you look at the past decisions, we were not prepared for this pandemic in terms of building our infrastructure. What this pandemic and the previous crisis, for example, Irma has shown us and exposed to us is our vulnerabilities within society and the ability to handle external shocks such as this. But one thing that Minister Doran always says, and I agree with, is that most of these problems did not start with us, but they are ours to own. And I would like to tell the people of St. Martin that we are working hard to make sure that even though you will experience inconvenience, there will be some discomfort, we are working hard to make sure that our population remains safe and could survive. We have already begun discussions with Minister Doran pertaining to what we will do with the Ministry of Rummy and how we can help bounce back after we open our doors. I've also had discussions up to last night with the Ministry of TIAT in terms of economic recovery. We are preparing. Please don't let anyone fool you. There's no free money out there. There's none. And we are doing our best with our limited resources. Thank you for your attention, and open to all questions by the media.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your opening remarks. At this time, I would like to invite the Minister of Justice, the Honorable Anna Richardson, to address you. Minister Richardson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Good morning, Council of Ministers, the media, viewers, and radio listeners. Firstly, I'd like to express my sympathy to the family and loved ones of those that we've lost in the last few days. I'd like to extend a thank you to the Fire Department of St. Martin, the police force, GEBE, and of course the residents that assisted with the ousting of the fire that took place just on Tuesday evening last. Being there was quite an intense experience, and seeing how the blaze was really of concern, and I'm just grateful that the men and women that contributed their time and expertise were able and successfully able to distinguish the fire. Thank you very much for that. A special thank you to the men and women who are not forgetting the elderly and those who are just unable to care for themselves by providing meals and ensuring that the necessities reach to them. Thank you so much for your contribution there. I'd like to share that last week, Wednesday, April 15th, I hosted a meeting with within Justice and also with external agencies, namely the Court of Guardianship, Acting Head Kimberly Brown, and Foundation Judicial Institute St. Martin, Cynthia Filmon, as well as external agencies, UNICEF Community Mobilizer, Ms. Suzette Moses Burton, and the Managing Director of the St. Martin Development Fund, Ms. Makishia Brooks. The purpose of our discussion was to identify how we can strengthen the support and active protection of our children. I believe this is a sector that needs a lot of attention, and so the ladies and I came together and we had quite a fruitful discussion, of which is going to continue this afternoon. I start by indicating that the protection of children is extremely important to me, and it's high on my priority list. And by extension to that, does the matter of domestic violence and spousal abuse. The police force has been receiving quite a number of calls with regards to issues surrounding this, and It is high on my agenda list as well as members of the authority and forces to address this. So this is not a matter that is going to be dealt with lightly going forward. We are going to take the proper steps necessary to protect the citizens of this country, both male, female, and children alike, the elderly. Anywhere that abuse is being administered or being done in our society, it's going to be handled. Crossing of borders. We know that in this emergency state that we're in, the Prime Minister, the EOC, as well as French authorities is doing as much as possible to be able to protect our society. And though certain citizens within our community might not agree with all the decisions that's being made, there is a larger picture here. And so being able to block borders or put precautionary measures in place is not with ill intent, but rather for the greater good and protection in this pandemic we are in. That said, I'm asking persons to please, we're getting footage of you or of persons that are going to the borders, points that are blocked, and allowing themselves to cross in manners that are not supported. And this is just increasing the support or services of our justice system to put their energy in places where we're really hoping that you can understand the importance and work with us. Please use the border points that have been established, and they are established for a reason. Waivers are issued for individuals that have valid reasons to be on the roads. It is not a difficult process to happen. Very little of the requests, as long as they show essential and necessary, very little of them are being declined. So please work with us so that we can protect our society. I'm asking all persons to also adhere to the law. I'm still witnessing individuals on scooters and motorcycles that are not with helmets. They are not adhering to the law. And there are other activities that are happening that is breaking code within this state of emergency. And I'm asking the people of St. Martin to please adhere to them. When we speak of the rent disputes, I think that our Minister Duran, Minister of Vromy, has spoken quite eloquently about the matter, and I continue to support him in his capacity as the Minister of Vromy and over housing. So that is my introduction for today, and I'm open for any questions. Thank you, Vernika, and for your audience.
Thank you, Minister Richardson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Silveria Jacobs, to address you. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ms. Roach. Good morning to you. Good morning to my colleague ministers in this press briefing this morning. Good morning to the members of the media present within our virtual press briefing, as well as to all those tuned in to this broadcast and who will see it at a later time. Today, I must add my thank yous to those of my colleague ministers who have already expressed their gratitude to the fire department. I would like to say that Fire Chief Mr. Clive Richardson reported to me. I actually received the report. And as the Minister of General Affairs, I wasn't even aware that that was something that happened, but I'm very pleased to have received that report from Mr. Richardson on behalf of Officer in Charge at the time, Clement Jones, reporting that the fire, though quite large and burning uncontrollably, that the fire department was on the scene and doing everything within its power to contain it. They quickly responded. However, due to the heavy winds and constantly shifting, as well as the inaccessibility of the rough terrain for the trucks, the responders initially could not reach the fire. All efforts were then put into blocking roads, assisted by the police department. So I would also like to thank them who assisted in this response. The persons living within the area which were being threatened, and that moved from Middle Region to over the pond, not over the pond, where do you call that, above Arch Road, Soccer Garden area. And they were so constantly moving and in contact via radio, also using a drone to assess the way the fire was behaving. The persons living within the areas that were in danger were prepared by the fire department and informed about evacuation and when that would be necessary. Also, the residents in the area were advised to close their windows to prevent smoke from coming in, as there was a lot of smoke, and to use their garden hoses to wet their property in advance to protect it in case the fire got too close. Thankfully, no damage to personal homes was had, and I'd like to thank the fire department and police officers, especially those who were on the scene, for their tireless efforts on Monday night from about 8 p.m. straight through until 6:30 Tuesday morning. I must commend each one of the firemen and women who stood on the front lines once again. Sometimes we take you for granted, but we thank God that you were able to work. And I must say that I received a call from the friend side from President Daniel Gibbs in the morning, informing whether we would have needed their assistance and that I should call if at all that was necessary. I know that our fire departments work well together, so I was able to reassure him that they had it under control. I would like to say a thank you once again from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of all the residents of St. Martin. This could have gone very wrong, and we thank God for the blessings that St. Martin continues to experience during this difficult time. Persons are, however, admonished to be very careful and refrain from lighting fires for any reason, especially without proper supervision by the fire department. I would like to now move over to the health aspect in this COVID-19 reality. Yesterday, Tuesday, April 21st, 2020, the St. Martin Medical Center received a shipment of 5 ventilators from the Dutch Ministry of Public Health, Welfare and Sport, VWS, in the Netherlands. The government is thankful. Government of St. Martin, as well as St. Martin Medical Center, is quite thankful for the grant of these ventilators. As you may know, we had already received 12, but unfortunately, 6 of the ones that had been sent were incompatible with our systems here on the island. Therefore, those were sent on or sent back via Curacao. If they can use them there, then they'll be utilized there. If not, they will be returned. So we were very happy to receive the 5 that came in yesterday. Also, during this week, as you may have read in our written press release yesterday, there are now 2 persons in the medical pavilion, mobile pavilion, which was constructed by government on behalf of the St. Martin Medical Center, outfitted and has a capacity of 14 beds for medium care. Medium is called level 3 or 4 at the St. Martin Medical Center, and we currently have now 2 patients who have left St. Martin Medical Center high level care, level 1, and moved over to 3, 4, where they are now, after that, possibly going to go home on their way to recovery. During the first part of this week, I also held strategic EOC meetings with, first of all, ESF 6 as the main carriers of this pandemic on the health level. Thereafter, it was followed by our strategic meeting with ESF's 5, that is the police department, 6, health, as I mentioned, 7, community welfare and social services, 9 is general affairs, governmental affairs, and 10, the Ministry of TIAT. Ministers of the relevant ministries were also invited to this meeting. Unfortunately, the Minister of VSA was called out to Parliament and could not attend. However, the Minister of Romy, as Deputy Prime Minister, was also there to receive updates and further deliberate on the COVID-19 developments. All this is being done in an effort to ensure that ministers are also in on the discussions related to the ministries that they hold responsibility for, as well as to streamline and collaborate as much as possible in the execution as well as planning moving forward towards our recovery in the new COVID-19 era. This must be our focus even as we deal in this emergency, because St. Martin must be ready to take back up the mantle to lead in the Caribbean as a #1 destination. It also gives us the opportunity in this planning period to diversify our economy, seeing how vulnerable we are for outside shocks, as Minister Irion, our Minister of Finance, has just mentioned. Also to update on the COVID-19 cases. Even though I published last night the results, we did have developments during the night, and after a discussion with our CPS epidemiologist, Ava Lista de Weaver, she was able to inform that there was yet another death that can be counted as COVID-related. Apparently, a gentleman that had passed away during the week was tested post-mortem for the COVID virus, as it was uncertain as to what the cause of death was. and it is determined that he also was a positive patient. As such, our totals for death related to COVID or persons who have been tested with COVID, as we know that 2 were not related, is now at 12. I must say that this is a very sad development. We have been praying earnestly and doing everything within our powers to inform the public, to get the public to seek medical attention as soon as possible, and at the least to seek the intervention of CPS if they feel any types of flu-like symptoms. As such, my condolences on behalf of the St. Martin government to all those families of the 12 persons on St. Martin, Dutch side, who have passed away, specifically with COVID related, but also those with non-COVID related, that it is indeed a very difficult time to lose a loved one. It is difficult in normal circumstances, but can you imagine that at this time, once your patient or once your loved one has been determined to be COVID positive, he or she must be immediately buried underground or cremated to preserve that the disease does not spread any further. This is the policy and the law, and so there is nothing government can do about that except uphold it. This makes it very, very difficult for family and loved ones to actually say goodbye in a proper fashion. And so I add my prayers also to those who are missing and unable to hug and console each other, that this indeed government is also standing in solidarity with you, and our flag will continue to fly at half-mast in memory of these persons as we daily see these flags and remember who and what we are fighting for. It is to make sure that no more persons pass away, and your assistance is needed in this. So we have 130 persons in quarantine. That number has gone up due to the fact that we have more positive cases, and therefore every and anyone that they have been in contact with who does not have symptoms will be asked to stay at home in quarantine and not go out, not even to shop for food on the days that we have open, or to go to the banks or any of that. If you are in self-quarantine or isolation, you are not allowed to leave the house. As a matter of fact, if you are in isolation, you should not leave the designated room within your home, thereby infecting and possibly infecting your family members as well as people outside in the community. So that's 95 in isolation and 130 in self-quarantine. At the St. Martin Medical Center, there are 7 persons in the medical center main location and 2 in the mobile medical pavilion. 258 people, or if we add, yes, 258 people have been tested. 70, did we adjust the numbers there? 72 are now positive. For 50 males, or 51 males and 21 females, 141 negative. We've seen a great jump in negative numbers in our recent testing done, which is good. And we still have 44 pending, since we now know the status of the gentleman who had passed away earlier. 1 remains inconclusive, and as of the 2 that died within the past 24 hours, 1 was the person that had been on the ventilator for over a week at the St. Martin Medical Center and did not show any signs of recovery. Unfortunately, his long battle has ended, and may his soul also rest in peace. We have now 22 persons that have recovered and are currently following 37 active cases. CPS, as I was talking earlier about that, is currently executing its community outreach and testing campaign. As you know, this state of emergency, which has resulted in us being shut down partially now, is mainly so that CPS and the community outreach volunteers can reach out to as many persons as possible, and this can only happen if you are at home. CPS continues in our fight against COVID-19, and I'd like to encourage persons, once you have been approached, to get tested as soon as possible. We expected that our numbers would rise once we did these, and yes, they are rising. However, less than we had thought. Actually, only 9 persons out of 600 that have been assessed were confirmed as showing symptoms. Only 9. And of the 9, only 6 consented to be tested. Each person that does not consent to be tested is a risk in our community. They have been told that they should stay at home. You do not want us to execute the law that is available. There are laws that if a person is considered a risk to public safety, that we then would take that person to court to mandate that they then be put in mandatory isolation and then mandatory tested. It is your right as a human being to choose what to do. But if you are doing or taking actions that puts the rest of our population in danger, such as leaving your home once you've been told to remain in quarantine because you have symptoms, or in isolation, once you have symptoms, you should do this. And if you are found to be violating this, you will be taken to court to be put in mandatory isolation. Instead of doing that, cooperate, be compliant, because the life you save may be your very own. Knowing your status, you will then come into consideration for the medication related to COVID, which is seeing all the great recovery that we have been seeing. All of the persons that have passed away were persons with serious underlying medical conditions that had they notified CPS within the first 5 days, they would have been receiving the medication that could have saved their lives. Save a life, save your life, save your family member's life, and report to 914 and get tested. Initially, we had a situation where the test kits had not arrived, and therefore why some of the tests remain pending now is because they had to be sent to Guadeloupe still. The local tests that we had have run out, and the expected tests that had to arrive here last Friday, the 480, were taken off of the plane that was supposed to arrive here and sent via another plane, which is scheduled to arrive today. I look forward to receiving these. I did put in my complaints in a meeting with the VWS, the Ministry of Volksgezondheid, yesterday and on Monday, and they were quite confused as to how that was possible, but this is the report I received from our lab, and so I expect that this will be rectified today once the over what they claim 600 test kits arrive today. We are therefore then able to get the results quicker, and I ask that you consent to being tested, all of those that have not as yet. All our isolated patients who are still having symptoms were tested, and anyone that is now found to be symptomatic is tested right away. But of course, as long as they consent. Many have come out negative as well, but it's better to know your status than to be walking around unaware and thereby spreading the virus. Please be a good community citizen and take care of yourself. Ensure that you remain indoors if you have any type of flu-like symptoms. I have a quote here that is very, very pressing for this time, and it's from Gary John Bishop. I quote, "Inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence and courage. If you want to conquer fear, do not sit home and think about it. Don't let fear control your mind." Mr. Bishop says, go out and get busy. Now we know we're in, unquote, I know we're in a state of emergency, and you know we're in a state of emergency, so don't take the last part of that quote literally. Don't go out and get busy out in the streets. What I would like you to do is to get actively busy putting positive thoughts in your mind. Because as a man thinks, so he is. Of course, a woman too. Dream, think positive thoughts, plan, and prepare for the days of normalcy, today's normalcy, as my colleague mentioned earlier. Our new normal is that we must remain socially distanced, we must consistently practice proper hand hygiene, and we must find ways to survive and even thrive in these circumstances, because that is who we are at St. Martin. I urge and encourage the people of Swaliga to remain faithful, continue to show that we are strong, resilient, united, and powerful people, that we are faithful people, and faith conquers fear any day of the week. This challenge we will overcome. This war will be won. Thank you. Thank you, St. Martin. God bless you. Thank you again to all our frontliners, and I await you any questions you may have moving forward. Stay blessed, St. Martin.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live virtual Council of Ministers press briefing. We now move to the question and answer session. Judy Fitzpatrick of the Daily Herald, you have the floor. Please unmute your mic.
Thank you so much, Rolika. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good, Judy. Go ahead.
Thank you. A very good morning to all the ministers present, my colleagues in the media, and listeners and viewers. My first question, it's a three-part question, and it's for the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, when someone is tested COVID-19 positive in a household, the entire household is usually advised to self-isolate. And currently, there are consistent reports that staffers, including frontline staffers at more than one supermarkets, have tested positive for COVID-19. I believe MP Emmanuel alluded to one such establishment in Parliament yesterday. These supermarkets, they're still opening, they're still open and functioning 3 days per week. My question, Prime Minister, is why the decision to have them remain open, knowing that, potentially other staffers may have been exposed and the potential risk to shoppers? The second part of my question, you had indicated some time back that persons were starting to show symptoms beyond 14 days. In some cases, I believe you said 17 and 18 days after exposure to the virus. And you had indicated that isolation period would likely be extended to 21 days. Has this already gone into effect? If not, why not? And the final part of my question, the 12 that was recorded on the male person who had tested post-mortem positive. Can you indicate whether this is one of the security officers that had been found deceased recently?
Prime Minister, please unmute your mic.
Yes. I was actually looking for some of the answers as Judy was speaking. Good morning, Judy. Yes, I can answer all of your questions. I will hope that I remembered all of them. There were more than one. There has been quite some talk going on about someone being infected or persons being infected and working at supermarkets. As you know, supermarkets were only allowed to open if the members or the staff was not having any COVID-19-like or flu-like symptoms. Collective Prevention Services, after hearing about this, did monitor the situation, did go to the mentioned supermarket, and has been following up with who is currently working at those establishments. So when they went and checked it out, all the employees had no flu-like symptoms that were working at the supermarket. Also shared with my person by CPS head, Mrs. Lisa DeWeaver, is that COVID-19 is spread from person to person when a person is coughing or sneezing. You can protect yourself by washing your hands, often with soap, coughing into your elbow, not touching your face, and staying at least 1.5 to 2 meters. They recommend 2 from other persons. If you have flu-like symptoms, I already said this a few minutes ago, you should call 914 or your doctor to ensure. So CPS did check out this as well as the inspectorate. They will continue. I've asked that they continue to assess not just the supermarket, but all places who are allowed to be open, which are allowed to be open. I do believe that someone that was working previously did have symptoms and they have not been back to the supermarket since they. We further asked whether persons who are isolated or if someone is determined to be, oh my goodness, I'm trying to turn on the sound. Whether persons who have COVID-19 positive or suspected to be are awaiting the results of their test, whether the family is also admonished to isolate. Usually persons who do not have symptoms are in quarantine, so they can remain moving around in their homes. However, anyone with symptoms is then isolated in one room or designated area of the house, and the rest of the family is asked not to interact with them as such. The family is given protective gear. The family is giving a list of do's and don'ts, not utilizing the same, not sleeping in the same bed, not utilizing the same towel, etc. And basically that only one person should be then designated in the family to deal with that person with the proper protective gear. and they're given the gear. If they have symptoms, they're also given medication, etc. And yes, the rest of the family should remain in quarantine, which means they're not allowed to be out and about as well until the person has recovered in the home, develop symptoms. They are also, and they have to also follow the same protocols. Again, all the persons that CPS has been following have either recovered completely or are recovering. So they have a very good track record with persons that they have tested. The best time to test is within the first 5 days of onset of symptoms. So when symptoms start. Also mentioned, proper mask use is also taught to the family members, etc. And Judy also asked, if I'm not mistaken, Relika, she also asked pertaining to the identity of the person who that liberty based on confidentiality reasons. If it had been your family member, I do not think you would want the government to determine who or divulge to the public who have and have not passed away from COVID-19 or who have symptoms or not. This is a person's right to divulge, and this is one of the reasons I believe, if you can indulge me for a few more minutes in this question, I believe this is one of the reasons that some of the community is not cooperating with CPS to be tested or even to allow or to even tell us whether they have symptoms or not. This is actually causing the problem to spread more, and so the stigma must be removed. That you are COVID positive is not a death sentence unless you ignore it and allow it to take over your body. So anyone can get it. We've seen prime ministers of countries get it. We've seen the very poor get it. Everyone and anyone can catch it. It is a flu, but it is only caught when people are negligent in getting too close to each other, in not using proper hygiene, etc. So there's a lot we can do to protect ourselves, and spreading crazy rumors or trying to identify every single person who has passed away is a waste of time. You should be protecting yourself, you should ensure that you stay at home, and you should try to help your fellow man. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Judy of the Daily Herald. We now move on to Lyndon Brown of BCN TV. You have the floor. Please unmute your mic.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, Lyndon, you're good. You can
Okay,
go
good
ahead.
morning to the people of St. Martin. And question to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the people who are concerned that some area you're not being specific enough. Meaning, also this question for all of you today. For instance, people are concerned about the rent, the landowners. Can you guys be more specific? With the government of St. Martin will help the tenants, with the government of St. Martin will help the landlord, because there are people who do not have no income at all, ministers. And it is a serious time for a lot of people. And sometimes people will thought that it's only the tenants, but everybody is suffering. The ministers and everybody feeling the pain of this epidemic. So, Minister, can you be more specific? The people want to know in what area you're gonna help them. People need food, people need monies, people do not have no job. People, just be more specific. Would the government of St. Martin gonna help the landlord financially? The tenants.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Speak to the people, Minister. The people looking for
Thank you,
hope.
Mr. Brown. We will let the Prime Minister answer the question now. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I believe, and you too, Ms. Roach, I believe that our Minister of Finance has clearly in Parliament yesterday, as well as during his opening remarks, explained the assistance that St. Martin is prepared to give. We have already started, even before the stimulus plan, in giving out food boxes. We've distributed 1,500 food boxes. Several other organizations have donated food, hot cooked meals, and they continue to do so. 1,500 boxes are being distributed again as of tomorrow. And during the first part of this week, those who required assistance have also been receiving assistance. Of course, we may not have gotten to every single person, and I have asked everyone who has been complaining or sending messages that this person or that person doesn't have and is below, is suffering. We have made every attempt to find these persons. We've engaged community leaders. ESF7 has had meetings with all those who are distributing, so the Red Cross, K1, church groups, etc. So we are not overlapping. We've assessed the over 10, almost 11,000 persons that filled out our social impact assessment form, and they were able to take out who had already received, as well as doubles, because if several persons living in the same household have requested assistance and a box takes care of 2 persons, they were then able to eliminate, and that brought us down to 3,000 persons. This was also in my press release of yesterday. 3,000 persons now have been identified as requiring assistance, and they will be getting the assistance in the coming days. They continue to be assisted via their churches, via other organizations, but also via government. I have asked the Minister of Finance, but he was very, very busy with the stimulus plan and explaining it, to establish also an account whereby persons and entities that have approached to assist government and do not want to necessarily go out and purchase and deliver themselves because of the social distancing, that we establish an account whereby community-minded persons who have the means are able to, as well as international agencies, are able to donate to government for this COVID-19 reality. As he mentioned, there is not a pot full of money to be able to assist every single person. In my meetings with the other prime ministers within the kingdom, I was able to learn about a fund. It has like 5 letters and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but with ESF7 and our EOC, as well as the Ministry of VSA, we are looking into how St. Martin can come into consideration for such funding, especially to assist persons who are non-residents and undocumented, because we feel and fear that such persons are not registering on the social impact form because of fear of deportation. That is not our goal at the moment. The goal is to ensure that everyone has food, and these organizations come in and assist countries as necessary, and they're assisting Aruba with the high influx they have of Venezuelans, and we are looking into getting assistance for any of the immigrant population that is undocumented and fearful of coming forward, that they will get assistance from these persons as well. So, Mr. Brown, I'm hoping that you are clear now. The stimulus plan will assist those who have jobs and that are registered with SZV via their employers, and those who are unemployed will get assistance via our stimulus as much as we can via social services. So this is what government is doing and planning. But of course, to be able to do so, we need our budget to be approved and we need the funds to be transferred. We can start the first month with our current budget, but we cannot sustain that unless we see more economic development. We see the funds that we have requested through our kingdom partners actually touch our bank accounts sooner rather than later. I hope to have informed you properly in this, and I thank you for the question.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your response. I would now like to allow the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Jurendi Duran, to add to that response. Minister Duran, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your question as well, Mr. Brown. Just to add a bit more in detail in regards to the question where it relates to landlords and tenants, I would like to make it known that it is against the law for landlords to evict tenants without a decision from the rental committee or from the court of first instance, as is mentioned in the Landsverordening Huur in Article 284. So just for the record in regards to eviction with landlords and tenants. Thank you very much, Ms. Roach.
Thank you, Minister Duran, for your response. We now move on to the next media person, Bibi Shaw of SMN News. You have the floor. Please unmute your mic.
Good morning. Rolika, are you hearing me?
Yes, Bibi, you're good. You can go ahead and post your question.
All right. My question is for the Minister of Education, Mr. Rudolph Samuel. Mr. Samuel, you announced that the Department of Education or the Ministry of Education has the attention, or the students that are currently abroad has the ministry's attention can you tell us exactly how many students do we have overseas at this moment studying? How many of them will face the situation of having no place to go sometime next month when their semester finish? And what exactly do we have in plan for these students other than looking at them? Is there a flight that is being arranged to return these children home?
Thank you, Bibi, for your question. Minister Samuel.
Thank you, Bibi, for the question. Bibi, on the 3rd of April, so that would be the first couple of days I came into office, the first thing I did, one of the very, very first things I did was to send a letter to all the scholarship recipients that we have abroad, so all of our students abroad, indicating to them that number one, that I'm the new Minister of Education, and also giving them my contact information, and again, also the contact information of the department, and pleading to them to make sure stay safe, and that if they were to have any questions, to please contact myself or contact the department. Based on the survey or the questions that I posed to the department, I know we have over 400 students abroad. We have received from some students some information in regards to being asked to leave the dorm, and some students were able to stay and some students were not able to stay. Some of them have been able to find residence by a friend. Now, we are in contact with them. It is not across the board that all of them are having requests to move at the same time, but as they send a message to the department requesting assistance or requesting something from us, we are attending to them as we go along.
Thank you, Minister Samuel, for your response. Just to inform the members of the media, we will only have one round of questions, given our time constraints. Jeffrey Sacrin of Island 92 Radio, you have the floor. Please unmute your mic.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for all of your efforts. I think we all recognize on the island that this is a challenging time for all concerned. The question that I'd like to bring up goes to Minister Richardson, Minister of Justice. You had talked in your opening statement a little bit about people crossing the border inappropriately, and there continuing to be problems. Our phones at the radio station have been ringing off the hook with regard to the border at Oyster Pond. I know that it's been reported a number of times. What are our plans from the justice side of the house to truly kind of lock down and really prevent inappropriate border crossings?
Thank you for your question, Doc. So with discussions with the Chief of Police and with other department heads that are a part of our support for law enforcement, we are again having discussions as to how we're going to put enforcements there at those borders, which takes away from already trying to be of assistance to the community in other sectors. So the discussions are ongoing as to how we can have that enforcement. But of course, you know, we are talking about the borders, so it's not just on our end, but the Prime Minister as well will be having discussions with the Prefect as to how the joint security will be beefed up. Because at this point in time, whilst we seek the cooperation from the general public in understanding the situation we're in, we do have individuals that are just not abiding by this, and we have to take measures, and it could lead to even more stringent measures to be able to protect the society that is massively affected by this pandemic. So I'll have more details for you within the coming days. I'll try to see if I can do that in a press release so that it's communicated prior to us coming back to another press briefing.
Thank you very much.
Minister.
Thank you,
Dr. Sog. Thank you, Minister Richardson. Minister Samuel, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would like to further just add for Ms. Bibi Shah that I have received questions from parents in regards to students that would like to return to the island. During the state of affairs and the closure of the airport, at this moment, nothing can be done. And as soon as it is possible that the airport is open and flights can resume, you can rest assured we would be doing all that we have to do and can do in order to get our students back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Samuel, for that addition. We now move on to Stephen Cerulean of PJD2 Radio. You have the floor. Kindly unmute your mic.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Good morning to the ministers, Prime Minister as well. My question is for the Minister of Finance, Adwell Arian. Minister, based on the stimulus package as has been rolled out by the Ministry of Finance, can you say as to exactly how many persons or companies have so far requested financial assistance from government? And two, the Prime Minister earlier on spoke of the budget. Are you closer to presenting the budget to Parliament? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cerulean. The data pertaining to how many persons have applied via the website of ssrp.sx, I'll have to get for you. But there's another format, I believe, that was sent out by the Ministry of VSA pertaining to businesses that were affected, and that question will have to be relayed to the Minister of VSA. Pertaining to the budget has been sent to Parliament already. I've heard, understood that they're busy scheduling the debates, hopefully for the end of this week.
Thank you, Minister Arian. Thank you, Stephen, for that question as well. We now move on to Dimitri Whitfield of the Daily Herald. You have the floor. Kindly unmute your mic.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dimitri, you're good.
Okay. So good morning to the ministers, the Honorable Prime Minister, and to all those listening and viewing here today. My question is to Finance Minister Adwell Arian. It's a two-part question, actually. Quite a few MPs in yesterday's Parliament meeting were concerned about the exemption list of businesses that are excluded from payroll support. It's understandable that free funds are not available. We don't have a pot of money, as you and the Prime Minister indicated. And government is doing its utmost with the resources it does have at its disposal. However, given that some businesses on the exemption list may also be facing severe hardships and closures, possible layoffs, is the government willing to revisit the list and give more businesses in a predicament a fair chance of obtaining payroll support? The second part of that question, of my question, regards the legal advice that was reported yesterday by several media houses, where an attorney at law questioned the legality of SZV executing the payroll support program. Finance Minister Arian, what is your comments to this? And are you reconsidering whether SZV will be the implementing agency?
Thank you for your question. No, I'm not. I haven't officially gotten any legal advice pertaining to the legality of SZV executing. We have done our own analysis, and there are possibilities, and for them to do it, that's why we chose them in the first place. The other question pertaining to the exemption list, I believe it was. I would also like to ask a question to the media, and a little different. Mr. Dimitri, have you actually looked at the exemption list or been through the process of, as a company, going through the exemption list?
Dimitri, can you unmute your mic, please?
Can you repeat that question, Finance Minister?
Have you visited our website and went through the process for yourself on the exemption list?
No, Finance Minister. I'm not a business owner, so I wouldn't have any need to go through it.
Okay. Well, you're still a journalist, but okay. If you go to the website, you will notice that even though you are on the exemption list, there's still a possibility for applying, and the website explains that. So, and you also mentioned it being done fairly. We believe that everything was done fairly with the right checks and balances. So if you go on the website, there's also an area that you could appeal if you feel that you should be qualifying for any payroll support.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your response. We now move on to the final question.
May I add a little bit to that, please?
Stand corrected. Yes, Prime Minister Jacobs, you have the floor.
Yes, I think the exemption list, and I don't know if the minister said it in Parliament yesterday. I wasn't able to follow that because we were in other meetings at the time. I haven't heard it here yet today, but for this projection and with the exemptions is for the first month. So persons who have also complained to me or mentioned or highlighted that they deserve to also be on this list because they can probably pay their employees for the coming month and maybe the month thereafter, but for sure, if things remain as they are, or even if things reopen based on the fact that others are not paying their bills, that they would not be able to do it, like say for another month, and thereby in applying now, even while on the exemption list, not falling within the qualifying list of businesses that could get assistance right away, you may, once you apply as a business that is on the exemption list and you feel that within a month or two, you will have the financial worry to pay your employees, that you should do so that you can be taken along for them the next month. This is for the first month assessment, and based on what we know now and what we expect in terms of who would be able to sustain for at least another month. So when minister says that you can still apply, really and seriously, go through the document, go through the process to register, and you will see that there are still options there. So I just wanted to add that based on the conversations that I had with minister in terms of asking him about certain businesses that have been exempted. Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Roach.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the final question. Wendell Moore of Seymour Journal, you have the floor. Kindly unmute your mic, please.
Thank you so much for taking my question. My question is directed to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, the numbers suggest that the amount of cases that we are having is still on the rise. CPS, of course, in their new venture going out into the community, is discovering that there's a stigma-related behavior where people are not even willing to be tested. I just want to know if there are measures, or if you're considering any new measures that whether it's tightening the lockdown or what have you, to be able to be sure that within the life of the new decree, the next 3 weeks, that you have this spread arrested.
Prime Minister, kindly unmute your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Yes, I was on another screen. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Yes, as we had said, prior to instituting the state of emergency to the point of shutting down the country, the first 2 weeks was actually to assess that. It was very difficult to do because of lack of capacity. The same 6 nurses that were busy on a daily basis and isolating the more than 200 persons on the quarantine and isolation list were then the ones that would have to go out. So in the meantime, we did receive persons that had registered to volunteer or assist with a medical background, and they were trained to assist CPS with the swabbing process. Besides that, a group of 25 persons were trained to go out in the community to assess ahead of CPS. So the process is that they would go out in the community outreach persons, speaking in the various languages, English, Spanish, and Creole, finding persons who may or may not be have symptoms for them to be able to be tested. CPS devised a ticket, which I signed off on, which the person would then receive if they had symptoms, and then they would be required to come to the mobile bus to be tested. What we realized is because of the stigma, because of seeing on Facebook and other social media that persons were being filmed, even as CPS visits isolated persons, or COVID positive persons in their full hazmat suit to protect themselves. Neighbors or persons further up were filming. So they're creating this like it's a negative something. The persons who are staying at home and being cared for by CPS or their doctors are recovering. That is good news. If you see that, there is no need to be filming that. So I believe, Wendell, that there's a negative stigma. People are afraid. They don't want people to see them walking, going to the bus to be tested, which because of, I guess, and also, I did not come out here and say it was this community or that community. But of course, it's being talked that way in the public. And that is so that no community feels targeted. What we're saying is that we think in initial phases, in putting out our information in English mainly, that we missed the boat in terms of informing properly. Maybe some of these communities are not necessarily internet savvy. We have everything online. You can go there, find all the information. But for some reason, persons were popping up at the St. Martin Medical Center in the far stages of deterioration. That signaled to us that we needed to do more. We created more multilingual messaging that went out on paper, in ads, PSAs, persons driving around with a speaker on their cars, advertising in these communities. Still, even though the outreach has touched in 3 communities over 600 persons, of which 200 plus homes, we are still not getting a response that, oh, we have 50 people who have any type of symptoms. We are hoping that it is honest, that it is only 9 persons that have symptoms, and that all 9 persons will consent to be tested in the long run for their own knowledge and own safety. But maybe the symptoms are so mild they don't see the need, and they're fine, and they'll recover because they're healthy, hopefully. If these persons have severe conditions, we can guarantee them they will end up in St. Martin Medical Center. If these persons have diabetes or any other underlying medical conditions, I can guarantee them they will either end up in medical center or they will pass away in their homes. This has already occurred on 2 occasions whereby persons have died and tested after death and have been positive. Nobody can say where they've been then, nobody can do proper contact tracing, then it is too late. Yeah, we then have to rely on family members to think of where these persons may have been, how long they may have had symptoms for, and the period that CPS says is the contagious time is a day before the start of the symptoms. So up until the day before is where they trace who you've been in contact with. And thus far, of the persons that we have been tracking and tracing, minimally have they infected anyone else. So that is a good sign. However, the persons we do not know, we do not know. And therefore, thank you for your question. We are appealing to people to come out, call 914, they will come to you. Don't worry about who's filming you. It doesn't mean that you have, a medical professional online said, if this virus could be caught just by passing next to someone, we'd all be dead already. We'd have died from AIDS. We would have died. A virus needs a host to be able to get into your system. So protect yourself, wash your hands, and you should be safe. But we're doing all we can, Mr. Moore, to inform the general public and to remove the stigma. And again, I'm making a plea for any of the recovered persons. Please come forward, share your story. You have that right to remain private, of course, but if you have recovered and you can share the story of your process with others, they might be inclined to report, get the necessary assistance to recover as well.
Thank you,
Any consideration for new measures?
Unfortunately, Mr. Moore, our time is up, but I would allow ministers to continue.
I'll take that because I did plan to talk about adjusting measures. In my meeting with CPS and ESF6 yesterday, they have been reassessing their strategy, seeing as they suspect that due to fear, many people are not coming forward, and they will be changing the way they do things, really just allow people to come on their own. So the community workers will continue to go out and talk to these people, but instead of having the bus be in the neighborhood and people feeling afraid to come to the bus, we will allow them in the days that they're allowed to move, if they need assistance to get there, transportation, etc., they're going to be in telephone contact with CPS and CPS will facilitate that they come then to the Vineyard building to be tested. We thought it would be easier to have the bus go to them, but it appears that is not the case. So they are adjusting their strategy, and they will be continuing to move about in the communities. So I'm asking all persons within the community who are of influence, because we have registered community leaders that we're using, but there are always influential people within a community who can assist CPS and the community outreach program. Mr. Romain Laville is leading the community outreach. So reach out to Romain, and he will ensure that the information gets to you, to get to the persons who you can influence to come forward and be tested. Thank you for the follow-up question, and for you, Rolika, for opportunity to answer.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Members of the media, this does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Thank you once again for taking part in this virtual live Council of Ministers press briefing. I will now allow the Prime Minister to provide you with her closing remarks. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Actually, Rolika, based on the question that Wendell asked, I was able to divulge that information, but it was mainly about the change of strategy of CPS. Also, there were some questions that had come forth that none of the media asked, were how do you know if you have recovered from COVID-19? The team at CPS will call a suspected case to follow up on their signs and symptoms. If after 7 days, the person feels better and has had no symptoms, so 7 days from the onset, and has had no more symptoms for at least 24 hours, the person is considered recovered. On our French side, they look at 48 hours. So, that means they have no more fever, no more cough, no more runny nose for at least 24 hours. One of the previous questions did ask about, I think Judy asked, about someone who beyond the 14 days had symptoms. What we have found out is if you had asthmatic cough or some other type of cough prior to getting COVID-19, we realized that the person that we continue to keep on the not recovered list had a history of coughing prior to COVID-19. So that cough then was not associated with COVID-19, and he was also then considered recovered. So to err on the safe side, we continue to monitor persons, but if you have a history or you have an asthmatic condition or you have allergies, you can still cough on and off, and therefore then we would not look at that. On the French side, as long as you have no more fever or no pain or etc., you are then removed from the infected list and to the recovered list. I think that this more or less answered most of the questions we've received. And so the CPS, the process for assisting persons, there's another one that my assistant just brought forward. CPS assist persons with COVID symptoms, following up. You would be advised then, if you still have symptoms, to stay at home. Once you are determined to be recovered, then you are told that you can end your isolation. You're allowed to then move around. If you have been hospitalized and now are back home, you are still advised to stay in isolation for another 14 days instead of 7, because having been in a hospital now, you can be exposed to other things as well. So to give your system a chance to completely recover. If you still have mild symptoms after this period, you can still spread COVID-19 to other persons. So persons who are removed or returning home from hospital are not recovered until all their symptoms are gone. You're advised to still stay at home until you are fully recovered, and CPS will continue to advise you on how to self-isolate. Yes?
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you for those who submitted those questions as well. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this does bring us to the end of this live virtual Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. For rebroadcast, tune into St. Martin Cable TV, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and the YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I am Rolika Roach, and bidding you a pleasant day further.